Well, welcome everybody. We're just waiting for people to come into the room, so it'll just be a couple minutes letting people get in. But what I can do is just getting started. Is we're really happy to have everybody here today. It's one of these conversations been looking forward to having as part of our virtual coffee chat for a while. So really happy to have Reid and Barry joining us. Just for everybody who if you haven't worked in Zoom before, there's an opportunity top right. You can change the look and feel of the screen. So if you want to watch speaker view or gallery view, in the bottom center of the screen, there's an opportunity to join in on the chat. Feel free to pop any questions into the chat and we'll make this pretty interactive. That's really the hope, is that you guys can join in and be part of the conversation as we go on. And at a self-promotion, I'm going to be doing a couple other sessions upcoming on February 24th with Western Sponsorship Congress, doing a session focused on sponsorship resources and detailing some things to help you keep your focus and keep you more outwardly focused rather than doing all the different minutiae that comes with sponsorship. Then on February 25th, with Festival Events Ontario, part of a panel discussing the state of sponsorship in events and the impact that COVID has had on that. And then in March, we have Nick Lawson from Squad, who's going to be joining us talking about digital sponsorship and different ways to utilize your digital assets and monetize those. And then as well in March, we've got Rahul Srinivasan, who's the Director of Partnerships for the Toronto Arrows, the Major League Rugby team in Toronto. We're going to be talking about being a newcomer to the space in Toronto, all the competition of all the other professional teams, and then the challenges they've had with having to relocate to Atlanta for the 2021 season. So there'll be some more information coming out about those in the follow-up to this email and over the coming weeks. But really excited to have everybody here today. And just a brief introduction, and I'll hand it over to Barry and Reid to introduce themselves. Reid Trimble is with Bad Mood Talent. There's a lot of representation with athletes and teams in the esports space, and has been great bringing brands in and coaching them to be engaged with those teams and athletes. And then Barry Alexander comes from the brand side, so working with iOvate XP Sports, most recently designing their brand integration into esports. And without taking away any of your thunder, Barry, do you want to elaborate further?
Hi everyone, great to meet you all. Great to be here today for this chat. Yeah, as Brad mentioned, I am a brand and product marketer by trade, so I'm on the client side of this esports ecosystem and sponsorship ecosystem. I've been in marketing for the last 15, 17 years. And then from an esports perspective, I became much more active in the space just over about 2 years ago, when we began looking at the portfolio strategy at iOvate Health Sciences and really looked at nootropics and cognitive nutrition and the value it could have to esports athletes as a space for our brand, our new brand to move into. So happy to be here to talk more about the space, the ways the brands can participate, and what the future potentially looks like.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Barry. And Reid, do you want to give some background on yourself?
Sure. Again, thanks a lot, Brad, for hosting this. Always love chatting about gaming and esports. My name's Reid. I work at Bad Mood Talent as the Director of Partnerships. We're an LA-based talent agency representing 30 plus exclusive esports athletes, creators, personalities, and more. My role is to work with people like Barry to market their brand and activate their brand through our talent and our assets. I've been in esports and gaming for the last 4 years. I had my own consultancy before I joined Bad Moon. And on top of that, we work with a couple of unique projects, one being a Fortnite creative team that builds in-game brand experiences. So think the most recent example is, the custom Super Bowl I guess you would call it an ad, but creation within the game, as well as the Travis Scott concert, etc. And then we also work on the product side with a keyboard company that we help them partner with teams, merchandising, IP licensing, etc. So my job primarily is to work hand in hand with people like Barry to make everyone happy and pull off successful activations within gaming. So yeah, super excited to chat about the ecosystem and more.
Fantastic. And I think that, you know, there's a lot going on in the esports space, and it can be, you know, pretty cluttered for somebody new coming in. I guess, you know, one of the big parts is, you know, who are all the different, you know, engagement opportunities when you start talking about the different players in esports. Either of you want to run through a list of, you know, it's not just sports general, it's all these different different engagement points and different types of audiences you can deliver.
Sure. So I think the first part is defining what is esports. You know, gaming is one of the world's largest industries. It's bigger than the music and movie industry combined. Esports is a subsection of the gaming industry. So esports by definition is competitive gaming. You can, you know, the best way to put it is you can go out and play soccer with your friends as a pickup game. You know, that could be competitive, but that's not professional soccer. If you're training and you're part of a team and you're competing in league competitions, you are, you know, competing in soccer. Esports is similar, where the pro athletes, the teams, they operate very similar to the sports ecosystem. They have training facilities. The athletes' sole purpose is to get better at the game, whether that's Call of Duty, League of Legends, or whatever it is. You have international competitions. So it's really important to define those two, because they often get looped into the same thing when they really aren't. In terms of engagement points and breaking down the esports industry, you know, there's a couple of buckets that I think people should be aware of. One are the teams. So those are the organizations that house the professional athletes. They are the branded organizations that operate similar to how the Toronto Maple Leafs operate. They have ticket sales, they have merchandising sales, they pay player salaries, they do all similar functions. You have the leagues, which are leagues within esports titles. So Call of Duty has the Call of Duty League, League of Legends has the North American League of Legends, the LCS, the LEC, which is the European League, the LCK, which is the Korean League, etc. So for each game title, you have a league. And then obviously you have the players who are the professionals who compete and train every day in those leagues for those teams. So those are like three buckets that I think you can separate esports into. But you know, it's the major difference is esports are controlled by a publisher. So for example, it would be like if someone owned football, and in order to play and in order for the NFL to, you know, use football, they would have to go to the owner of football and approve, you know, apply for a license, whether that's through a fee or etc. So that's the one major difference, is the esports are controlled by the publishers. And, you know, that's a whole different conversation, but hopefully that gives a good picture and a good overview of the esports ecosystem in 5 minutes. Barry, do you want to jump in and add your 2 cents?
Yeah, and I think those are the three main buckets for anyone on the client side to be thinking about when they think about how they want to activate their brand. Obviously within that, when you look at players, there are the athletes that are part of teams, but then you also have talent and personalities out there that, or streamers, if you will, as we've called them at iOvate, that may not be tied to a team, but are influential personalities within the space. space. So I look at something like Call of Duty, where one of the individuals on our team, Nameless, who also works with Bad Moon, he is not tied directly to a team, but he is an influential voice within the space, a very high performing player within Call of Duty. So he is also someone that brands, or someone like him, is someone that brands should be looking to work with. And then within the leagues, you also have league competition, but then you also have tournaments and events that are also activation opportunities within sub activation opportunities within the league pillar, that brands can bring their message and bring their brand ideas to life.
That's a good point. A good way to look at it. And what's funny about the esports and gaming ecosystem that's not the same in the sports, traditional sports realm, is the creators rule the ecosystem in gaming and esports. Whereas in traditional sports, the athletes rule the marketing side. So who would traditionally, you'd rather partner with LeBron James than some trick shot basketball player who's creating YouTube content. I would say it's the opposite in the gaming ecosystem, where creators such as Nameless, Ninja, all these people, they're not esports athletes. Their sole purpose is creating content, and they're getting 10x, 15x the KPI value, the impression value that some teams are getting. Like Ninja himself is getting more value. You get more media value out of partnering with someone like Ninja than you would probably partnering with an entire, the Overwatch League, for example. So on paper, that individual is getting more media value than an entire league. So you can see where the disparity is. Now, as esports grows, as the ecosystem grows and more competitive gamers and more fans, younger fans come into the ecosystem, that might shift. But right now, the superstars of the gaming industry are not the esports athletes, they're the creators.
And the creators, different from the producers. I mean, like the producers are the actual physical game creators, and then you've got these influencer creators, for lack of a better term. So you have that differentiation of somebody who's streaming on Twitch or on YouTube, and they've got a massive following.
Sure.
So do you find the engagement with them is the same as it would be in the influencer space?
Personally, I haven't worked with many other influencers other than gaming industry influencers, but comparatively, we actually see a relative uptick in engagement rates just because of the nature of how they create content. For a lot of people, their primary platform is video based. So it's either YouTube, Twitch, or now TikTok. And we found that the video based, the front facing sort of consumable content is way more engaging than a fitness Instagram influencer who is, posting workouts every day. And I think that comes down to the fact that people are watching them for 4 to 6 hours a day play Call of Duty, and have the ability to type in chat, have the ability to direct message them. Whereas, if you direct message a fitness influencer with 1 million followers on Instagram, chances are you're probably not getting a reply. If you watch a Twitch streamer and you type in chat, there's a strong chance that you get an immediate reply. And then what happens is you get an immediate attachment to that person, right? So think of if you're sitting courtside, or even you're just watching a game and you type a message to an NBA player on the bench and they reply back. Like, imagine how, as a fan, how much more engaged you are, and how much more enthusiastic you are about watching that player, watching that fan, now that you've actually had interaction with them. So I think that's a unique part of gaming, is there's so much interaction between their community and the actual influencer that it separates them from other industries and other influencers.
I would agree with that as well. I went from the roster that we've developed on XP. We've found incredibly high engagement rates for the content creators on the roster in comparison to some of the creators that we have on other brands that are more within the fitness space. Per Reed's example, one particular per athlete, he plays NBA 2K. And one of his posts had one of the highest engagements that we had seen on a single post at Iovate, for about the 6 or 7 months prior, and that was kind of around the launch of the product and him being the first 2K athlete that we're working with. So I think part of it is also it's such a the audiences for these content creators, they're so engaged, whether that be from the posting of highlights or, as we talked about, they're watching them play for 2 hours to 4 hours at a time on Twitch. There is a really deeply ingrained relationship between these creators and their audiences that they're able to create a lot of engagement, a lot of fan reaction from the content they create and the brands that they partner with.
And one more point, Barry, and I don't know if you actually have any professional esports athletes on the XP team, but one thing that I'd like to point out, there are certain advantages to partnering with an esports athlete. You get the kind of, brand image of, let's say you partner with the best Call of Duty player in the world. You're going to get the fact that your product, such as XP, that gives cognitive focus, higher energy levels, etc. You're partnering with the best in the world, right? So people are going to say, okay, if X uses this product, I know I'm going to be better at Call of Duty because X uses this product. On the flip side of that, that athlete is training 8 to 10 hours a day, doing scrims, going to the facilities, creating team content, etc. Their number one priority is to the game and to the team, not to creating content. So if you're looking at it and saying, okay, we want to do a content-based strategy with a professional esports player, it's going to be very tough there's only certain individuals that can do that, just because of the fact that their main focus and what they're doing every day is not creating content, but actually practicing. So when it comes down to creating content, it's, from our experience on the agency side who represents these players, normally they're not as enthusiastic and they create a lower level of content than someone whose main goal is to create content. So when you're a brand, you need to look at, okay, are we doing this as a brand equity play, or do we want to look at getting as many impressions, as many sales as possible? Because esports and esports athletes and gaming creators offer two different packages to a brand looking to enter the space. And Barry, you can attest to that. I'm sure you've worked with both. Yes,
definitely. I think as brands consider how they want to activate within the space and within the athlete / content creator pillar, I think it's important to understand what's the right mix. So, for us, from an XP standpoint, we looked at a mix of esports athletes that are training and working on the game, understanding that, and our agreement with them did not include as much content creation. It was more about product placement, logo placement on kits, logo placement within the game where they can control it, things such as that, that make it really easy for them and increase the number of impressions while they're playing the game and while they're winning games. And then from a content creator standpoint, much more heavy on the content creation side, telling the brand story, having more fun and having a bit more freedom with the brand, and then striking what that right balance is so that we have the credentials that are delivered by the esports athletes and their performances, and then from a content creation standpoint to really drive the engagement and friends interacting with the brand and with our personalities.
Yep, you guys killed it. That's a really, really great explanation.
I guess part of that feeds into just trying to figure out the audiences, and there's such a variety of the athletes you're dealing with. I mean, somebody who wants younger audiences, maybe Roblox is it, that type of gaming versus getting into League of Legends or Fortnite, etc. So what's the best way to identify the the audience you need and the right placement within esports?
I think it's tough.
Yeah.
I think it depends on your product and on your brand. So us, for example, when we developed XP and we were developing XP to be a nootropic performance product that supported executive function, focus, energy, and eye health. Those were the key things that were core benefits that gamers and athletes told us that were important to them, as if they were to design the perfect product. So we were looking, really from a performance angle, and then we ended up selecting titles that would lean towards more high performance titles that then changed our demographic. So, our focus was, Call of Duty, and then NBA 2K. We had a lot of insights around that game and that very engaged community, and how much performance is important to that community. If we were I'm trying to make up the cap. If we were more of a confectionery snacking category product that was leaning more into casual consumption or convenience consumption, we might move differently, and we might try to understand the demographics of other titles and events that might more suit that. I think as brands are coming into the space, I think it's important for brands to understand who they are and what their core benefit is, and then what the audiences out there that align with that. Because I think as you then approach a Bad Moon talent, or you approach creators and teams and athletes, or events about how to partner, having that knowledge and then understanding with those events what their demographics are, help to really build a really elegant activation solution, versus kind of treating esports all as one. And then saying, esports, digital native, 18 to 35, great, got it, go. You're likely to really dilute your investment, dilute your dollars that way.
That's a really good point, Barry. The number one question I ask brands like yourselves when I have an intro call is, who are you trying to target? What's your target demographic? And working backwards to say, okay, we want to hone in, we're a confectionery brand that just released a healthy version of Rice Krispies. We want to target, younger consumers so that they push their parents to buy our product instead of Rice Krispies when they want like lunch boxes. Okay, you can actually activate a 12 to 16-year-old audience in gaming. Fortnite, their biggest audience is between 12 and 18. So it's really about finding that audience and then working backwards. And this is kind of where we step in and asking agencies like ourselves, asking people who represent creators or work in the space, what would be a recommendation based on our target audience? And we can recommend games. I'm not going to recommend Counter-Strike, who has an average audience of a 30, 31 or 32-year-old male, to someone who's targeting a younger demographic, right? So to answer, I think I can see in the chat, the question is, think of it again like sports. The NHL audience and the NBA audience are completely different. The Call of Duty audience and the Animal Crossing audience are completely different. So it's really about working backwards, finding your target demographic, and then working with experts in the space to ask them how they would recommend targeting that audience.
And I think hand in hand with this question is the fact that there's a terminology that I've seen in esports that I haven't seen in any other element of sponsorship when it comes to any other property. It's the whole concept of endemic versus non-endemic brands. And does that play a factor in receptiveness for the talent, or different engagement, or how the audience reacts to brands? Yeah, I know, Reid, you got that in there.
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't do any brand deal, any partnership, unless our talent are on board with it. I've seen too many times a brand, even an endemic brand, or quote unquote an endemic brand, if we're calling it that, a keyboard company, partner with the wrong talent and have a campaign that has a extremely negative marketing spend. And that's because everybody has their preferences, right? you would never put Michael Jordan in a situation where, even though you're paying him millions and millions of dollars, imagine him repping Puma. It would just look weird, right? So the number one thing is, we always ask our creators, our talent, or whoever it is, do you actually care about this product? Do you actually care about this brand? Because if not, we're not going to do that partnership no matter how much money is on the table. So it doesn't matter if, you know, it's an endemic brand or a non-endemic brand. I think the number one thing is, you know, making sure that you're partnering with influencers that actually, or talent, or whoever it is, that actually care about your product. Because the worst thing you can do is partner with someone who's just there for a paycheck, and, you know, everyone loses in that scenario. So for any brand entering the space who's curious about working with influencers, find a way to, whether it's working with an agency or even chatting with the influencer themselves, you know, sending them free product, doing something to say, okay, we're here for you. Are you here for us?
And I think it
I
comes
agree with
to
that as well.
Go ahead, Barry.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think as a brand, as you're approaching talent, the first thing you should be doing is selling the talent, or the collective on who you are, and what your brand stands for, and what your brand wants to bring to the table to the consumer and to their audience, and what value you want to create for the audience. As brands enter any space, esports or basketball or hockey, you know, the role of these partnerships and sponsorships is about meeting the audience where they are through a passion point, in this case esports, that says something about your product, that brings something about your product to life. If you're not, as a brand, working through that filter, endemic or non-endemic, you know, you're likely going to end up in that situation where you're going to have a very negative marketing spend. And even the endemic and non-endemic, it's just interesting, we were talking about this earlier, how the terminology of endemic and non-endemic really is only heard as it applies to esports. You know, no one questions whether or not Wheaties is a non-endemic product to basketball. It's, you know, it's cereal. It's a non-endemic product, but they've done a really effective job, you know, Reed, as you put it, of curating an endemic brand personality that ingratiates them in their space. Red Bull, another great example, as well. So as brands, as we enter the space, it's how are we in curating content, curating relationships around us that make us endemic into that space, make us relevant within that space to the competitors and to the audiences.
Yeah, and just to add one more point onto that, I mean, we have a perfect example. Some of our influencers actually work with XP, and I can tell you right now, the first thing we did was ship our influencers the product. And we only, I remember we were having discussions about Matt, Mr. X, who's one of our influencers. I mean, you guys even put an offer in front of us, but Matt wasn't super enthusiastic about the product. So we turned it down. And I think things have turned out super well with our other influencers who are like really bullish on the product, drink it, whether they're promoting it or not. Because that's really the genuine feel of the influencers when they're streaming is what actually ends up selling the product and making your brand great, right? And just to give a really recent example of a brand that quote unquote is non-endemic entering as an endemic partner to esports is Cash App. Cash App has done a really great job of partnering with the right talent in the space to activate, to kind of support their influencers and support their community. So what they did was they actually they give away subscriptions on a Twitch channel. So just to give you some brief insight into how that works, is similar to how you subscribe for Netflix. You can actually subscribe to a creator's channel. So Cash App went in and partnered with influencers and basically gifted their community subscriptions. And now they are synonymous with that. So through that marketing campaign, they've quote unquote become an endemic brand to the space. A gamer will recognize Cash App within the space, even though 6 months ago, they might not have had that same sort of connotation. So for any brand who's like, oh, we're a bed frame company, how can we become endemic? Like, how can we even reach the gaming audience? There's ways to do it. And the way to do it is by working with the talent and working with the agencies to create campaigns and create ideas that work with the gaming space and that community.
Yeah, and how hard is it to bring that in? I mean, you're thinking about, the natural endemic ones where, you've got a keyboard, you've got your gaming chair, those all make sense. Probably with a little bit more work, you get the Red Bulls of the world, or how Gillette and Ninja partnered together and created that alignment. We did have an advanced question just about professional services. You're a law firm and you think you've got a play in here. Where would you start?
There's plenty of law firms in esports.
Yeah.
There's plenty of law firms in gaming. I don't know if that person, it's an entertainment law, in sports law, like we negotiate contracts, like basically employment contracts. We negotiate talent contracts, we negotiate player contracts. We do everything that a traditional sports agent or sports lawyer would do. And then on the entertainment side, Barry, maybe you can speak to the brand side, but like there's tons of legal work that goes into everything within gaming and esports. So, especially from a lawyer side or from a law side, there's plenty of ways to enter. It's just a matter of like how you want to position yourself. And then from professional services, there's always need for consultants. There's always need for people to kind of enter the space and offer their insight. Also, just because I'm having a lot of these conversations, training. So if you're a trainer, ergonomic injuries happen all the time. Think about it. You're sitting at a desk for 10 hours a day. You're clicking a mouse. Like you're going to get tendonitis. You're going to get, players who are malnutrition because they don't eat the right foods during the day. So, there's a huge spike in health and wellness in the scene right now. So if you're a trainer or anything like that, creating programs is definitely doable. But Bear, I'd love to hear your side on especially the legal stuff from a brand perspective.
Yeah, from a brand side, the legal part is part of the brand side experience as well. In terms of just as you put, like there's lawyers on the negotiation side for the talent, and then from a brand side as well. If looking at the brand being the legal services entity, I think it's that same process as it is for XP, as it is for Rice Krispies or any brand. It's understanding what is the service provided, and then how can that service interact with the esports athletes and their gaming audiences, as well as their casual audiences as well. So I think there's different ways that you can structure a relationship and develop activation around that relationship that creates brand visibility, communicates what your product or service is, and brings it to life. I think for every brand, and sorry not to be able to have the exact solution for for the any law office here that might be in the audience, but I think going through that process, there is a solution there that you can develop a really effective activation platform within the space, targeting these audiences. Another way I would look at it is it's, because I think a lot of times on the brand side, we tend to really confuse things and overcomplicate things, especially in situations where things are new or really growing quickly, and we're kind of traveling behind it. It's the content that you're supporting is no different than if you were to tag your content to the Toronto Raptors or to a sports franchise, or developing an ad. You're communicating something about your brand within a channel. So, you're just looking at these content creators as another media platform that you can communicate your brand through. And you're just finding the most effective way through that media channel to communicate what value your brand brings to consumers and their audiences.
I think feeding out of the the legal discussion we were just having, there was a question about IP and streaming rights and licensing rights. I think there's some interesting challenges around that. Like who owns those? Is it the team? Is it the individual? Is it the the producer of the game? and how does that affect sponsors getting into it?
I think it's kind of a big question. When it comes to the games themselves, the publishers own the rights. So you can play and stream the game, but if there's any sort of tournament or event or prize pool or any sort of monetary figure attached to it, that has to be approved by the publisher. If you're looking to modify the game, it has to be approved by the publisher. If you're starting to, if you're looking to start a league, it has to be approved by the publisher. So that's more on the game side. On the Twitch side, I think it's the real sort of legal battle that's been going on is the content that's actually streamed. So you can't turn on NFL, you can't stream NFL on Twitch, right? Because that's owned by the NFL, and they have a distribution contract with, for example, DAZN, right? The biggest one that's come apart is the music industry. Up until last year, you could basically stream any song during your Twitch channel, but obviously the music labels and everyone cracked down on that. So now you have to have an actual license or an actual approval from the artist or the music label in order to play a song. So that's caused a lot of content that includes licensed songs or bigger songs to be removed from Twitch, which has been quite a handle for a lot of streamers. But I think when you're a brand looking to enter the space, it's more of just covering your bases and making sure that if you are doing an event or something like that around the game, you talk to the publisher. It's always not a bad idea to even have a contact, because the publishers and the people who own the IP are always happy to work with brands. So Barry, I don't know if you had to go through that yourself, but it's mostly revolved around the publishers and the games themselves rather than the actual distribution on Twitch.
Yeah, we've had to have those conversations as well, in terms of, or even what we have the right to use. So and it's actually not dissimilar for anyone that has had experience with working with one of the leagues, where if you are partnering with the Toronto Raptors, for example, you are actually very limited in your ability to use game highlights, or what I call between the lines and between the whistles, in your own content or your own social content. Esports is a little bit different. There is a little bit more leeway given. I think as properties start to realize the value of making their content as democratically available, through different social platforms as possible. But as you're finalizing contracts with a creator or with an event or with a league, I think it's really important that the terminology is really clear as to what your content rights are in terms of what they can provide you to activate the brand if you want to do anything within your own channel, and what isn't permissible. We've had even a couple of experiences early on where certain pieces of content were allowed because of how it was captured, but then other pieces of content, if it were, for instance, within a tournament, as Reed mentioned, are not permitted because that content is actually owned by the league or tournament, and there aren't pass-through rights with those assets.
And I guess becomes there's a lot of complication because there's so many players. Like, what impact does a publisher have on who can be a sponsor or not be a sponsor?
We haven't. I think I don't know what on your end, Reed. We haven't experienced So for example, good example, Call of Duty, Mountain Dew Game Fuel is the official, Game Fuel is the official, Mountain Dew 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 Game Fuel is the official drink of Call of Duty and of the Call of Duty League. But we do have, but brands or other energy or other soft drink brands have the ability to partner with individual athletes in that space, as long as they're creating content or activating or competing outside of what Game Fuel and Call of Duty as a publisher own, which again, I'll kind of keep using parallels here, where Nike is the official outfitter of the NBA, but you have athletes with the NBA that are partnered with Puma, with New Balance, with Adidas, from an individual level that can compete in Adidas shoes, but when they are on official league business, they cannot wear they cannot wear those products. So I think there's similarities there in terms of how to navigate what rights you have with an athlete or a league, depending on what competitive barriers are there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good example. We haven't really come into. We work a lot in the Call of Duty League, so we're very familiar with how the Game Fuel partnership works. But similar to teams, they teams have the ability to go out and secure their own sponsors. When it comes to the athletes themselves, and this comes to creators too, who are signed to organizations, individual sponsorships can conflict with team sponsorships. So, an example is the Toronto Ultra, which is the Call of Duty franchise here in Toronto. They are partnered with, Universal Music, right? I can't go out and do a deal with Warner for Methods, who's one of our clients who plays for the team, because he has a commitment to Universal and Toronto Ultra because he's signed to that team. He's being paid by that team, and part of his contract includes those blackout categories. So it really comes down to and this is why I say just working with the creator themselves or someone who knows them very well to understand, okay, can I partner with this person? What's the exclusivity like? And how does that play into my brand partnership? Because the last thing you want to do is partner with them and then have to deal with a team or another entity coming down on you and saying, what the hell are you doing? Like, they're signed to us or we have exclusive rights to their content.
And thinking about the fact that a lot of these opportunities, because it's on Twitch, because it's being broadcast, that it's got a global reach. If you're looking at a regional brand play, what opportunities can you recommend?
Interesting. From my experience within esports, one of the things that we learned early on is that we should actually look at it regionally. There's some titles, there's some creators that are transcendent, but for example, XP Sports was launching in China as well, and what we found was that the platforms and the gaming titles that particularly in terms of the gaming titles that drove streaming content were very different in China versus in North America. So in North America, it's Call of Duty and Fortnite are the ones that are really dominating the amount of streamed content that is out there. In China, it's League of Legends that really drives the streaming content. So we couldn't take a strategy that was going to be Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, and NBA 2K driven and expect that to just plug and play wherever we go. We did need to look at, if we're going to look at it globally, really look at each kind of macro region and then understand what the titles were that were driving, what were the titles were in the personalities that were driving content in those regions, and tweak our strategy accordingly in order to make sure that we can maintain that level of effectiveness. I don't think there is I think there's very few one size fits all titles or events or creators within esports. I do think it is very regional. In that sense. Reed, I don't know if you've had other experiences with other brands.
And regional is a good way to put it, just because without the recent Overwatch League and the Call of Duty League, all esports teams are global teams. So Team Liquid, Cloud9, Fnatic, FaZe Clan, 100 Thieves, like these are big names within the industry. They do not, yeah, they might be located in LA or Berlin or wherever that is, but it's not like it's, you know, Barcelona FC or the Toronto Maple Leafs that have a regional or a city tied to their name. Now the Call of Duty, now Activision, the publisher, took that model, the traditional sports model, and plugged it into esports. And what they found is they're not getting the traction, they're not getting the sort of adaptation that they were expecting. You know, if on paper you look at those leagues compared to any other esport, Rocket League, League of Legends, etc., you know, a lot of it can be attributed to the content, the players, etc. But, you know, there's a huge disparity in viewership and a huge disparity in fandom for the Toronto Ultra to another esports organization that maybe doesn't have that tag to them. So that's one thing that you have to consider, is it's less about, you know, targeting specific cities or specific really micro markets. It's more about finding people that can reach a region. And there are creators too. Like the biggest question I get asked, just because I work here in Canada, is, you know, we're a Canadian brand. We only want to target Canadian audience, Canadian gamers. How do we do that through influencers? I can tell you it's impossible. You're going to have a crossover like any other industry, but there are creators out there who have built a brand around them being Canadian. A really good example is Nick A30. He's a Fortnite creator, but he literally has EHA in his title. You know, it doesn't get more Canadian than that, right? So for I think of a Canadian brand like Tim Hortons, you know, he would be at the top of my list as someone I'd want to partner with within gaming, because he is, you know, call it Captain Canada, like a very good example of someone who reps their nationality and someone who you can use at a more micro market level to just target that Canadian audience.
To build on your point about you know, things like Call of Duty League or Overwatch League or NBA 2K League, you know, what we've found in developing relationships with teams is that it's really important to not only talk about the team, because you know it doesn't operate the same way like partnering with a basketball team or hockey team or baseball team might. Is really understanding the players on that team and the way that their audiences are constituted. So, you know, for example, we had started a relationship with the NBA 2K League team, and what we found was their audience was not even really driven by where the team was located. There was one player on the team that was basically just driving all the draw for the team, both from a team perspective and from an aggregating perspective in terms of all the players on the team. That was outside of the region. It still was a relationship that worked. But I think if you are saying, you know, oh, you know, this, you know, the 100 Thieves team that's based out of LA, if you are partnering with that team and just wanting to target LA or Vancouver Titans and just targeting Vancouver, what you'll likely find is that where your audience is coming, where your engagement is coming from, is not going to necessarily be, you're going to see a lot lower percentage of your engagement coming from that geographical area than you expect. And again, it's because the titles drive macro regionally. It's not really micro, and these content creators are macro regional. They're not. There's not this micro local easy strategy that you might find in other platforms and properties.
Yeah, and I guess it's one of the the elements of it. Thinking about the fact that other sports, you're a diehard hometowner. You're from Boston, you're a New England or a Red Sox fan. You're in Toronto, you're a Leaf fan. So it sounds like there's not that same affiliation with the teams that are growing out of there. And I think Corey's just added into the chat, that 30% of social media fans come from those metros. So it's an interesting deal because it provides that. Or you would expect that it provides that regional piece, but you're saying that the impact just isn't there. One One of the other elements that somebody was asking about, and this refers back to something you were talking about earlier, Reed, just about the idea of tournaments and the challenges about getting permission to do those elements. Somebody was asking about the charity space and gaming within the charity space, and I think about Princess Margaret Hospital has got a tournament that they've created. And I haven't had a chance to chat with Jordan there about what's been going on, but have you guys had much experience in those space and some of the challenges associated with it?
I actually am very, very close friends with Kevin Polid at Princess Margaret, and I helped him. I was actually a consultant on that project and basically helped him build that out from a paper napkin idea. So very familiar with charity. It's actually arguably the most competitive space for creators. There is extremely high ROI for someone, a charity entering the space. On average, a streamer will raise anywhere between $300 and $1,000 per stream. So you can think about that. If you get a team of 50 streamers, there's arguably 50K of passive revenue or passive donations just by having streamers on your team, right? So I think the culture of supporting creators is stronger than ever within gaming, and you see that with a subscription model. Like, I mean, I'm gonna say it because it's the only one I can think about. Like, besides maybe Patreon or even OnlyFans, like Twitch is really the only site that YouTube and Facebook are monetizing as well, but the only site that people are paying to watch people create content. Like, that's crazy, right? So think about it. If you're a charity, the people are already paying $4 a month to watch, their audience, this streamer just streaming. What's $5? What's $10 to donate to a cause, right? So I think you're seeing tremendous ROI, and what's happened is charities are aware of that and now are trying to partner with influencers left, right, and center. Like, I probably get 1 to 2 emails a week from a different charity saying, hey, this is who we are. We're doing a streamathon. Like, how can we, work with your talent? And my number one advice to anyone in the audience who's thinking about doing this or working with a charity right now is you have to be unique, and you have to find ways in which your cause really is authentic with the influencer. There's too many people out there who are trying to jump on the bandwagon. Yeah, you should focus cause first. Okay, like, for example, I'm working with Covenant House on a charity event that they'll be putting on in May, and my number one suggestion to them was only partner with influencers who care about Covenant House, who care about homelessness, who care about what you're doing within the community. You're not gonna, even if you pay people, you're not gonna find, there's too much competition to allow yourself to, have a team of 50 half-ass influencers. I'd rather you have a team of 10 influencers who are extremely committed to the cause. So in short, very competitive space, but also extremely high ROI if you find the right people to work with. Also for brands too, Barry, like, really great opportunity to experiment within the space. So, a lot of brands are supplying product as giveaways, sponsoring, that sort of stuff. And it's a really great way to, number one, build brand equity within the space because you're sponsoring a charity event. Everyone loves that. And number two, test the market without spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and immediately have access to a number of streamers and a number of influencers. So it's a good way to test the market for sure.
Makes a lot of sense.
One of the advanced questions we had, and just thinking about the fact that a lot of changes are happening in terms of the gambling space when it comes to North American and European gambling and what can be done in association with sports. One of the questions was where does that fit into esports? Has there been consideration in that? Are there brand considerations that you need to be worried about if all of a sudden you can start betting on different outcomes?
I mean, I think the biggest struggle for betting is it just comes down to the publisher being on board with it. So similar to how like the NFL, the NBA, the NHL just really got on board with betting, a lot of esports are not 100%, you know, Riot Games, Activision, they're not 100% on board with using betting as a way to promote their games. So I think it's still kind of a gray area like it is in sports, but you know, there are sites that offer esports betting. There are people that bet on esports. It's just, you know, it has the same amount. It's a buzzword because betting in general, sports betting in general is a buzzword, and sports betting in general is just growing as an industry. So I don't think esports betting has anything that's, you know, truly unique about it. It's just another avenue for a fan to put money on a game. The only difference is that it's controlled by the publishers rather than the leagues that sports are.
Yeah, that was the, you know, from a brand perspective, that was the piece that I thought might be the only unique element, is that you know versus the sports, the traditional sports as we know them, versus esports, that the publisher element and the publisher's comfort level in terms of betting and gambling on their titles, and how brands can potentially participate in that. That is the only thing that I can see. But I think, you know, as brands, is, you know, we you know, continue to monitor. Interestingly enough, and Reed, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, I think there are titles out there that probably might lend themselves probably to fantasy growing quite quickly, you know, fantasy esports growing quite quickly within the space, you know, even before betting truly takes hold, you know, on a macro scale, you know, in terms of the collection of stats, and the way those can be packaged up, you know, into a engaging platform for audiences. I see that as a really interesting future opportunity for certain titles that can aggregate that information to make the games engaging.
Yeah, that's great, and it's a good segue into kind of the last couple of minutes we've got here. You know, where do you see the future for brands getting engaged and for esports there?
Yeah, go ahead, Barry. I think we're going to share pretty similar points, so you take the lead on this one.
I think from a client side, from a brand side, I think it's important for every brand to kind of think about how they can participate, you know, in this space. I think that, you know, looking at you know, at the past year, you know, we've seen streaming, obviously, as people are more home, and, you know, explode. And I think, you know, talk about how long it takes to create a habit. I don't think we're going to see a drop off in terms of the consumption of this content, you know, once markets are able to open up in more of a permanent fashion. And then even as you kind of participate in these games, I think one of the things that's really unique about these games is that they're almost mini social network ecosystems in and of themselves, the way that they operate. So anyone here, if you've played Call of Duty Warzone, you know, you can establish a friend group, you can connect with them, you can message them, you could share content within, you know, within the game and outside of the game. Not dissimilar from any of our behavior on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or TikTok today. So I think that it's a unique space with, you know, the technology around that in a much more digital native environment for consumers, that this is only going to continue to accelerate and move forward. So I think it's important for brands to try to understand how these audiences and how these sports creators are using their categories, and how they can activate and support the space.
Yep. Just send it, you know, everything you said was very, very well spoken. I think the number one thing brands are scared of is they're not educated. So, you know, everyone is on Instagram, everybody's on Twitter, everybody's on Facebook. They know how the app works. They know what influencers are, etc. You know, a lot of people that I speak to don't have a person who is an expert on Twitch on their team. And that's where we come in. Like my number one goal is education over everything. I will sit and talk with you for an hour and a half if it means you understand how to market on Twitch after that, right? You know, literally I do lunch and learn sessions where I offer half an hour to an hour of free consulting to anyone who wants it on just how to educate themselves on activating Twitch influencers, because once you get there and once you understand it, the ROI from a straight data perspective is so much higher than, you know, almost any other platform influencer group out there right now, that it's just so worth it. So that is my number one thing, is work with someone, talk to someone about learning about the space, because it's not going anywhere. And if you think you can't activate in gaming, you're wrong, because again, as I mentioned, literally everyone from IKEA to Cash App is doing it, and they're doing it successfully. So you know, that's kind of where I would land myself, is the ROI is there, the audience is there. Get educated, learn, and then make your decision from there, because it's definitely worth it, especially now that we're going into what could be year 2 of COVID and everyone is going to be online. So I unfortunately have to have a really hard stop, but feel free to, Brad, I don't know if you want to send everyone out like my email or my LinkedIn, but always happy to chat. So please connect with me. And Barry, tremendous time. I love your insight, and hopefully we'll be speaking very soon.
You as well. It was great doing the session with you.
Great. Well, thank you both. It's fantastic having you both on, and really, appreciate the time and the insight you provided, and definitely up to taking you up on that offer, Reed, and hopefully, Barry, you don't mind saying that I'm going to send out an email to everybody who was on the call today with a link to this recording if you want to watch it again, and a connection to Barry and Reed if you've got additional questions that didn't get addressed. I think they'd be happy to bounce that off and provide some additional advice. And want to promote the upcoming sessions in March. We're going to have Rahul from Toronto Arrows on board, talking about just becoming an up-and-coming professional team in Toronto and how busy that market is. And then Nick Lawson from Squad talking about digital sponsorship and different activations, so how to monetize your digital assets. And again, want to thank everybody for participating, and thank you again, Reed and Barry, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.